You're listening to the Studyclix Podcast, your number one source for junior and leaving cert tips. We make exams easier. Hello, welcome back to the Studyclix Podcast. Whether you're a first-time listener or a loyal Studyclix fan, we're glad that you're tuning in. This week's episode, myself and my sister Nessa, but also my colleague, who we both work for Studyclix. Mm-hmm. We both know our bit about studying and about school life and exams and all that kind of stuff. And usually every week we try and give some tips on how to make that easier for you. And this week is no different.
That's right. So this week we're focusing on something called spaced repetition. If you haven't heard about it before, don't worry. Most people don't know about it. Actually, myself and Eimear only learned about it recently, and we're kind of wishing, because there's so many studies proven about how effective it is, we kind of wish we'd found out about what you're saying.
Once you do know about it, you're kind of like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Why wasn't I doing it before? Like, I'm totally regretting not having learned about it before and using it for my leaving cert, because it probably would have. A big thing that people say about it is that it saves you so much time because you're just doing it a lot more efficiently. It's not about studying a lot, it's just about studying smart or doing it in a smart way. So it is, if you do get into it and start to use it right, then it's going to be a bit of a life hack kind of.
Yeah, studying hack. We're all about those hacks.
Yeah. So this podcast isn't, so there's actual scientists out there and brain doctors. Is that what they're called?
I'm pretty sure that's what they're called.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they actually know about the brain science of it and how your brain sort of categorizes things. So the actual science and proof behind this. We're not going to go into all that at the moment. It's not really our scene here at the Studyclix Podcast.
We are not brain doctors.
Our goal here is just to sort of give you an introduction to spaced repetition. If you haven't heard about it before, we're just going to talk about what it is, how it works, and give some examples of how you can do it. And then hopefully afterwards, if it's something that you think could work for you, you can do a bit more research on it yourself. There's plenty of videos and articles out there about it. And then you can try and give it a go yourself.
Yeah, and you don't obviously have to read whole scientist books about it. Just there's quick like YouTube videos and stuff that explain it really well as well. But this is basically just your introduction to spaced repetition. It's not exactly a study method. You can keep studying in the way that works for you. It's more a studying technique. It's how you use your study method. Yeah,
and like what way you do it and how long you do it and what times you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so first of all, what is it? What is spaced repetition? So yeah, like we said, it is a studying technique on top of a studying method. So it's based on this memory phenomenon called the spacing effect, which is the way of spreading out the information you learn or you read, or the information that you take in over time so that your brain retains the information better and for longer.
Yeah, so it's like gradually having bigger intervals between the time you study. So instead of studying the same thing every night and then you're like, okay, I've studied it every night for the last week, so now I have to know it. It's more like, okay, tonight I studied for the first time. Maybe I'll study it again in 2 days' time, and then I'll study again in a week's time, and then I'll study again in a month's time. Of course, this all depends on how much time you have until the exam that you're studying for. But it is this kind of idea of slowly having the intervals between your study bigger and bigger. And this is obviously just on one topic. This isn't just like, oh, I study absolutely everything for the junior cert on Friday and then I study absolutely everything a week after that. It's like you're obviously doing this topic by topic, but that's basically the main idea, is that you're spacing your time so that you're still repeating the study so that you're reminding your brain what you've learned, but you're spacing it out a bit more and more so that your brain is kind of training to remember it better.
So you might be thinking, if stuff is spread out over time and you have more time between your intervals, how is that working? The idea behind it is that though our brains have a very large memory capacity, it is designed to just forget things over time, especially if you're not making use of them.
Yeah, like think of languages, for example. If you learn a language and you don't practice it for like a month or two and then you try to speak the language or try to write it, you are going to struggle, because if you don't use the things you're learning frequently, then your brain is just like, oh, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to use that space for something more productive. Yeah. So then that information might be there some more way in the back of your mind, but you're not going to be able to easily recall it. So
exactly,
your brains just work that way, that they try to remove things that they don't need anymore. So you need to constantly, but kind of slowly remind your brain, no, this is something I still need to know. And that's what your spaced repetition is kind of.
Exactly. So like, for example, because a lot of the education system in Ireland is based on having a good memory, and you feel like as long as I can just read everything and take it in, that's what can make it hard. Because if you read it at the start of the year and then you try to regurgitate that onto an exam paper a couple of months later. So for example, especially because this is actually something to do in home ec, but I could learn and memorize the steps needed for applying for planning permission. And that's grand to just memorize that. But if I'm not actually physically applying for planning permission, I am going to, like in real life, I'm going to forget that very soon. So yeah, it's all about making use of the actual information that you've learned. You know, if you're not physically going to do it, you're going to have to keep reminding your brain of it.
Yeah. So the idea is that you learn something.
Yeah.
And then the second time you study it soon after. The third time you study, you leave a bit more of a space. And then the fourth time, even longer, or maybe like the night before the exam. Again, like I said, it depends on how much time you have before the exam. But
to kind of put this into an actual time frame. So say in 2 weeks' time, you have a test on irregular French verbs in the past tense. So you know it's 2 weeks from now. So the first time you look at them is tonight. Then you might look back over them tomorrow night or the night after. The third time you look back over them would be a week later. And then the fourth time you look back over them is the night before the exam. So that's kind of what we mean by the spacing of spreading out when you study it in the most efficient way that your brain is actually going to remember the information.
Yeah. And obviously if you're doing this with hundreds of topics across all of your subjects, it's going to get sort of hard to organize and keep track of, what did I study last? When am I going to study it again? So there are some things that you can use. We would recommend using online tools as much as you can. Obviously, if you are kind of more of a pen and paper kind of person, good for you. You can also keep boxes for different subjects and put flashcards. Flashcards are the big ones that work best with this method, but you can also try and use it with maybe past papers if you want to print out some past papers and practice short questions or even long questions, things like that. But flashcards would be the main one. So if you are doing it with sort of pen and paper, then we recommend having boxes. And then trying to separate the boxes into different sections so that you can, for the first time you study it, you keep your flashcards in that one first section, the second, and then you put it into a second section and so on and things like that. And you keep it organized that way. Again, we're not the massive experts on it. This is just an intro. So there are a lot more tips and advice on how to do that correctly online and in videos. So we do recommend checking out spaced repetition on YouTube, things like that. But the more easy one, and especially for the generation, your generation, our generation, who uses technology all the time, it's just easy. There are a lot of free apps that you can use, flashcard apps, things like Quizlet, Anki. They're both great. And they also have a function built in which lets you say, okay, I don't want to study this again for a while, or I do want to study this again soon, because you can decide yourself whether, okay, this is easy, I know I'm going to remember this, or this is kind of tricky to remember, I want to revise this again tomorrow. So you can sort of organize all of that within apps usually. So do look into different ones, see which ones work best for you.
And yeah, like Eimear said, we really encourage actually looking up online, because we know that this is purely an audio platform and it might be hard to imagine, especially if this is your first time hearing about spaced repetition. There's lots of video tutorials, especially if you are using the pen and paper like flashcards and you're confused by the idea of boxes. But yeah, like we said, in this glorious age of technology, like with all the apps that are available out there, especially the free ones like Quizlet and Anki, they are really useful. And I suppose it's really good that it's all organized within your phone, which is something you're less likely to misplace over like pen and paper, I guess.
Yeah, big time. And it's just, you have it then for as long as you need it. If you're starting as early as in fifth year or whatever, and you want to keep these up until the final days before your exams in sixth year, it's just handy. They're always going to be there. It's worth putting the time into creating the flashcards and things like that, because it is, at the end of the day, like I said, it's a really efficient way of studying. So it's more about long-term retention of the information, kind of keeping it all in there, as opposed to cramming everything at last minute. And it's
forgetting.
Yeah, because you're just gonna forget it. So it will, if you do this early and start using this, then it's gonna be a lot more efficient and it'll save you time, and you won't have to be doing this thing of, I need to study 8 hours today because I have so much to cover. If you start using this, you'll notice that your brain just remembers it easier, and you don't have to try and do these huge study sessions. You just have to be clever about how you're doing it. And this, like we said, it's been proven by lots and lots of studies, so it does work. We're not just making up stuff. It's just, this is actually proven. So we really can't recommend it enough to just even give it a go. If it's not for you, then you can go back to using other stuff. We also have podcasts on different study methods, so do check out that one as well. If you're not finding that any sort of study method you've tried so far is working for you, there are plenty others out there. You just need to find the one for you. And we talk about all that in our study methods podcast. So listen to that one as well if you haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. That one's great, especially for like kind of ones that you possibly have never even heard of before. That's kind of what we aim to do with that study methods podcast.
Yeah. So to recap, Nessa, what is spaced repetition and how can our lovely Studyclix users use it?
So in summary, spaced repetition is about spreading out the information that you take in over time in a way that helps you remember it for longer. And this is better to adapt into your studying so that over the course of your course, leaving cert or junior cert, if you start studying earlier on in the year and you want to remember it by the time that you're doing exams, if you're using this technique, you're more likely to remember information over a long period of time. The way that you can adapt it into your own studying is through using flashcards, be it on pen and paper or within an app. If you need any more, like we said, if you need any more information on or inspiration on how to manage this, we really encourage you to look up examples on YouTube or blog posts or anything on the internet. There's so much resources and information out there on this. Like we said, it's really, there's been books written about this by the brain doctors. They know what they're talking about.
Neurologists, I remember the word. Yeah, but like we said, this was just an introduction. But it's basically just a trick and sort of a hack to convince your brain that you need this information long term and not just short term, because you've probably found before that maybe you spend a day studying a topic and you feel like, oh my god, I've spent the whole day studying this, so I really shouldn't need to do this again because I've spent the whole day on it. But that's not how your brain really functions. That's not how it stores information. So if you come back like in 2 weeks time and you're like, oh my god, I can't remember anything about that topic even though I spent a whole day, it's not working, because that's not how your brain wants to work, and that's not how it will work. So do try to keep this in mind when you are studying in the future, because me and Nessa anyway certainly think that it will help, and all those brain doctors / neurologists think so too. Use the technical term. Yeah. So hopefully this has been somewhat beneficial to you. As always, our goal here at Studyclix is to make everything school life. We know it can be super stressful, and anything at all that we can sort of hand over as advice to you to make things a little bit easier, a little less stressful, we try to do it. And we do think this is a really top tip. So
yeah, we know we all know, we've been through the process. We know exactly how stressful studying and exams and school in general can be, and that's all Studyclix is about, is just making that a little bit easier. That's all we want to do. Yeah. And we hope that we helped you a little bit today as well. Yeah.
And if you have any feedback or anything else you want to hear in the podcast, you can get in touch with us at any time at all. We always love hearing from our lovely users, our lovely listeners. Do email us at info@studyclix.ie or message us through the site. You can also message us via our social media platforms.
So Studyclix is on all the popular social media platforms, that being Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. On Snapchat, we are study_clicks if you're searching for us. We post study tips, funny stuff, competitions all the time. So definitely check us out.
Yeah. And if you have a time at all, we'd love it if you could leave us a little review to help us get seen by other people, help our tips get out there. But otherwise, we're going to leave it there for today, because I think we've given all we can give on this topic. All we can
say, yeah. I hope you take something from this, and that, yeah, let us know if you try it and found it to be helpful, and share it with your friends.
Yeah, do let us know if it is working for you. We would love to hear your success stories. So Tune in for some more tips in the next Studyclix podcast, or if you haven't listened to all of our previous podcasts so far, go back and listen to a couple of them. But otherwise, it's bye for now.